I guess we'll just give it a minute. See, more people are coming in. And we're ready to go, right, May?
Yeah, ready when you are.
Okay. All right, I will go ahead and get started then. I see it's 3 after the bottom of the hour. So good day, everyone, and welcome back to our Zowe Quarterly Update webinar series. I am Rose Sekach, the Zowe Onboarding Squad Lead, and today I'll be joined by Fernando Cedeno and Timothy Johnson. Fernando is a squad co-lead for the Zowe Explorer for VS Code, and Timothy is a squad member for the same. Let's just go to the next slide and we'll talk about what they're going to be covering. Just to let everybody know, what we do on the quarterly update webinars for Zowe is we present a focus topic. This quarter, we are going to be focusing on what's new with Zowe Explorer for VS Code. Upon completion of that focus topic, we will talk about some news, general news, and some upcoming events, and we'll make you aware of what may be happening with the December quarterly update. So just one moment for housekeeping items. Just a reminder, the attendee microphones are muted. Obviously, the panelist microphones are not. The webinar will be recorded for replay and will be available at the OMP YouTube channel. Just look for the Zowe Quarterly Update playlist. If you have any questions as Fernando and Timothy go on, please don't hesitate. Go ahead and type them into the Q&A. We have someone who will be monitoring the Q&A throughout the discussion. Alternatively, you can also type comments and questions in the chat. If we run out of time, we will follow up with responses as soon as we can. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Fernando to begin the conversation on what's new with Zowe Explorer for VS Code.
All right, thank you, Rose.
You're welcome.
So to begin with, most of you might be familiar with the tool, right? Zowe Explorer might be using it from V1, but today we're just going to talk about some of the key features that have started happening in V2, right? And a quick summary, right? This is what we're going to go through. Definitely going to try to pace ourselves here because we have an hour for this topics, right? But a lot of things have going on here in V2. First, team profiles. You all sort of know how the V1 profiles came along with a single individual YAML file, right? Now there's V2 profiles, team profiles, MFA support, security, definitely important. A lot of enhancements around jobs, holding capabilities, a lot of setting, standardization and migration from V1 and to V2, logging, and last but not least, user experience, right? Whether that is multiple selection, reduced number of pop-ups, notifications showing up at the bottom right, better filtering and better attribute inspection for dataset members, you name it. And of course, my favorite, graphically being able to modify USS file attributes. And as we go through, we're going to see each one of these items here in the list in a short demo, right? To start with, though, team profiles, right? Quick reminder, quick refresher, right? Profiles, they just hold connection details, right? Whether that is your host, port, and credentials. Those could be basic authentication for username and password, token, and certificates, right? The advantage now with team profiles over the V1 profiles is that as you can see here on the right, team profiles have the nicety of everything being in a single pane of glass, right? You can modify it doesn't matter if your site is small or large, right? You can have all the LPARs, all the environments, whether that is dev, QA, production, right, all in a single file. You don't have to be jumping between multiple different directories to just look for your profile details. You can modify them. You can leverage or reuse data from other profiles due to nesting and base profiles as well, right? MFA, right? Security is definitely something that we take seriously in Zowe Explorer. And when we talk about MFA, we know that sometimes it's kind of hard. You need this second device, say your phone, a website, right, where you get a token, a number. And you may be wondering how Zowe Explorer sort of managed to do that. And this is where the API mediation layer comes into play, right? I know some of you might already be familiar with the API mediation layer, but since it's the first time we're talking about the API mediation layer here, I just want to give a quick overview of what it is, what it serves. It's just like a security checkpoint, right? It is kind of the extra layer that sort of abstract a lot of the services, right, that might be available on the LPAR, but makes them available in a single host and port combination, right? Quick note here, in terms of the API mediation layer configuration, you as an end user do not need to worry about how to configure the mediation layer, right? But your system administrators definitely will. A quick note, I kind of forgot about the team profiles. Another benefit, right, is that they provide a lot of efficiency. We sort of mentioned that. You can modify different LPARs, QA, dev, prod. Onboarding, definitely important. If you have a new team member, right, you can share this configuration file without being concerned of your credentials being leaked or anything like that, right? Same with collaboration and customizations, right? Whether you're bigger or small. And we can see a couple of examples of like a large setup with a bunch of LPARs, different plugins, right, and whatnot. And in terms of polling capabilities, we're just might as well just jump to demo for this one, right? Real quick, I'm going to be using this sample config file, very short one, not even 40 lines long, just a single LPAR and a single API mediation layer connectivity, right? But this does not say that you cannot have like a very large amount of LPARs, different services, in this case, plugins through the CLI or extensions for VS Code, like the FTP, the Kix extension, and whatnot, you name it, right? But for the purpose of the demo, right, just gonna go in, same operations you could do with your V1 profiles, right? Oops. Okay, 1 second. Of course, live. There we go. All right, sorry about that. That was a bit of a hiccup. Not sure why my keyring was locked. Let's try that again. There we go. And the password, if I'm putting that right. All right. Timothy, my apologies. Would you mind jumping on in with your section? My apologies for that. I will make sure that my environment is working properly before I can continue with the demo. Or of course, live demos can be problematic, but would you be willing to do that, Timothy?
Yeah, sure, I could do that.
All right.
So we're just jumping ahead, Fernando? Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and then I'll come back a bit later.
All righty.
All right. Thanks, Fernando. Yeah, so I'll be talking a bit about for the second section of today's webinar, about the extensibility API for Zowe Explorer. And so first of all, what is it? Well, it is an NPM package that's called Zowe Explorer API. It defines multiple extensibility APIs that are used both in Zowe Explorer itself, and they can also be used by extenders or by developers who are interested in creating their own VS Code extensions that can extend the core functionality of Zowe Explorer. It also consists of multiple modules. These include profiles, tree, as well as logger. And I'll be showing some samples in a bit that kind of demonstrate how these modules can be used. Why would you want to use this extensibility API? Well, VS Code and Zowe Explorer together make a great platform to extend. They're both quite popular. VS Code is currently the most popular editor, as you can see here at the bottom right, like on this graph. In the 2023 Stack Overflow survey, VS Code by far won as the most popular or as users' favorite text editor. And then Zowe Explorer itself has over 100,000 downloads, so it's also a popular extension for VS Code. And they also provide a platform that offers a strong mainframe support. So with the combination of extensions provided by the Zowe community, this includes support for mainframe APIs like ZOSMF, as well as like APIs like FTP and also Kix. And then we have some extensions provided by vendors as well. So like Broadcom offers a code for Z, and IBM, they offer a Z open editor. And so then this includes support for other mainframe tools and languages such as COBOL, high-level assembler, JCL, and Rex, just to name a few. So you're able to build on top of this platform. And then how would you do so? Well, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but if you want to create a new extension that can use this extensibility API, you would, of course, need to have VS Code itself if you're going to be extending it. And VS Code is a great platform for developing a VS Code extension. You can do testing, debugging of your extension directly inside of it. You would also need to have a Node.js installed as a JavaScript runtime on your local machine. You would need a package manager like NPM, which is typically bundled with Node.js and stands for a Node Package Manager, or another common alternative would be Yarn. If you have one of those package managers, you can use that to install the Zowe Explorer API package and any other packages that your extension uses or that it depends on. And then the language that you'd be using would be either TypeScript or JavaScript. I recommend TypeScript. It's a more feature-rich language, but either one is an option. And so moving on here, and also in the spirit of this webinar, showing things that are new with Zowe Explorer, we have recently added several different samples to our repository to kind of demonstrate how Zowe Explorer can be extended. And I want to show some of these live here. So we do have all of these in a samples folder in the Zowe Explorer GitHub repository. I'll be providing a link to that later. So if any of these samples interest you, if you would like to create an extension, maybe similar to or based off any of them, you can do that. And so I'll get started here, going in clockwise order, starting on the left with menu items. And I'll just transition to hopefully sharing my VS Code in a second. And so here I have a Zowe Explorer currently set up for one ZOSMF profile on all 3 trees. I'm just going to do a search for some data sets. And so if I right click here on one of the data sets that has come back from my search, there's a context menu that appears, and there's a new item that would not ordinarily show, but it's being added by this sample extension. this item will show the node's context. And when I click it, you'll see down at the bottom right, it shows me this is a PDS. This is a partitioned data set that I'm looking at. And this context can be useful for other extensions to then key off of. So I'll show a few more examples that might make that a bit more clear. If I expand this data set and view the members inside of it and show the context again, this is a member node. When I say node, I just mean one of the tree items that has an icon and like a label associated with it. And then if I right click on this profile or this session node and show its context, we can see that it is a session that Zowe Explorer has also validated and that's currently active. So where these contexts can be useful, they're things that are usually like behind the scenes and users wouldn't really see them. But if you wanted to add your own a menu item, for example, maybe you want a menu item that shows up like only when a user right clicks on a PDS that would allow them to compress it, or maybe you want to trigger off of the name or off of the label of a node, and maybe like only for a Rex data set. Maybe you want to add a menu item that would allow users to say execute that Rex script like in TSO. Those would be some examples of some menu items that you would be able to add yourself with these capabilities. Now, the second sample I want to show is how to add a new tree view. So rather than just a menu item, you can see here that we're adding an entire fourth tree. And just for sample purposes, this is showing me all of the Zowe profiles that I have on my system. And so here you can see I have like different types of profiles, and then for each type, it's going to show me which ones exist on my system. I just have one of each. And you can also define actions in your extensions so that when one of these tree nodes is clicked on, then some sort of action will occur. And so in this case, if I click on one of these nodes, it's going to open my Zowe configuration file, and I can see where that profile is defined, and I could then go and I could then edit it. And so you might be interested in creating a similar extension to this. If there is maybe some sort of mainframe API for which you would want to show hierarchical data, an example of another extension that already does this is the Zowe Explorer Kix extension. It also adds a fourth tree down here, which can be used to manage Kix resources. And so maybe you would want to do something similar for another mainframe API. The next sample I'll show is actually a web view in Zowe Explorer. And so this sample extension will add a new command that I can run. Just for test purposes, I'll run this hello world command from the VS Code command palette. And this will show me a new web view over here on the right-hand side. What I mean by a web view, it's basically like a component that you can add like in VS Code, and you can have any of the same components you would have on like a web page. So it's extremely flexible in the types of controls that you can offer beyond the limitations that you would normally have in VS Code. So if you wanted to have, for example, a form for users to be able to input data, maybe their connection info for a new profile that they would want to create with like host, user, password, and so on for connecting to some mainframe service. There could be a form here, like in this web view. I believe Fernando will be showing an example of a web view later, where you'll be able to see how you can have things like checkboxes, buttons, like all those types of controls in a nice way for users to interact with. You could even have something like a tabular view of data as well. Maybe, for example, if you wanted to view ZOS jobs in a table, you could have multiple columns where a user can then sort by each one of them. So they could sort by like the job ID, name, status, and so on. Web views are extremely flexible, and you could use them for all kinds of things. And the final thing I want to show here with this web view, something else that makes it powerful, is that we can communicate back and forth between this web view and VS Code itself. So I have a button here inside of this web view, which will send a message to Zowe Explorer or to VS Code itself. So you can see here that this notification appeared in VS Code when I clicked on that button. And we can communicate both ways too. It's really bidirectional. So if we wanted, we could add some sort of button on this notification, where from VS Code, I could then click on that button and have it update something back inside of my web view. And then the final sample I want to show, this one's a little more complex because I'm going to be adding an entirely new profile type to Zowe Explorer. So far, I've only been dealing with ZOSMF profiles. And we have also, for Zowe Explorer, we have an FTP extension, which is an example of another profile type that we want to support, because not all users may have access to ZOSMF on their mainframes. And so in that case, being able to offer FTP as kind of an alternate backend is something that is quite useful. And so in this case, just for demonstration purposes, I'll click on the plus button to add a new profile here within my USS tree. And so normally this item, this SSH profile, would not show up in the list because Zowe Explorer does not out of the box support SSH profiles. This sample extension does. So now I can add the SSH profile into my tree. I can perform a search. I'll just search for a USS path. This extension here is a little slow to connect, but it should come back when I search with a list of files. And then I can even open them within VS Code. It's just a little slow again to download. So this example here is probably not exactly the same kind of thing that you would want to do. It's probably a little bit like unlikely that you would want to add a new profile here inside of the USS tree. But hopefully it kind of shows and gives us some ideas for maybe something that you could combine with the sample I showed earlier with the tree view sample. Maybe you want to add a fourth tree, and maybe then you want to add support for a new profile in that tree. So they're probably not in the USS tree, but if you combine like these, but if you combine these two samples, hopefully you can see how that would then be useful to be able to connect a new profile type to a custom tree that you have added. And I believe with that, I do have some more content, but I'm also at a good stopping point. So I'll give Fernando an opportunity if you wanted to take control again, or if not, I can keep going.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good.
Good to go, you mean?
Yep.
All right, I will stop sharing then.
All right. Apologies for that. I had to switch my environment completely, but happens in a live demo, right? Again, going back to my system, we were just talking about team profiles, right? How to make use of them. For now, right? This is where we left off, right? Just doing a couple searches, right? This is regular operations as you would with V1 profiles, but now using team profiles, using this configuration right here, right? The thing that I want to focus on for the next portion, right? That being the polling capabilities, right? Say this job, I'm just going to submit it. Again, regular operations, same as V1, you already completed. It is a IFPR 14, so nothing to see here, right? But there's this other job that I believe it was created by Trey Yelovich, another member of the team. It is intended to showcase the polling capabilities, right? just going to copy this directory and do a quick search on that on USS, right? And what we'll see here is a file that just has a bunch of sleeps and sort of progressively starts or prints data to this pool, right? And similar to the testing job, which was an FBR14, just gonna submit this one, right? It's gonna see it, says active, right? Oops. And initially, right, as you see here, this is the first thing that it prints out. After a few seconds, right, it's going to start printing more and more data. I could, for example, hit the F5 key that is bind by the extension. You could modify that in your settings, but as soon as I hit the F5 key, you probably notice something down at the bottom here, which it comes to with the user experience enhancement of reduced pop-ups, right? Of course, I don't want to be hitting enter, be hitting F5 here in this file. So I'm just going to, or this spool file. So I'm just going to do start polling. I'm going to say, hey, do it every second. Why not, right? So it started a countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And without me, like I can just move on, continue looking at other jobs, and he would have continued, as you see, polling from that file, right, from that spool, right? I could continue my job as that continues to track the data coming in through the spool file. So let me stop that so we don't flood this mainframe, this instance with requests, right? And go back quickly to the slide. Oh, MFA, right? Definitely don't want to forget that one. For MFA, again, we do make use of the API mediation layer. You as an end user don't have to worry about it, but system admins will. For MFA, got to use API mediation layer. So I'm going to leverage this other API mount profile connecting to this base profile, right, where we store the tokens and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and do a login operation. I'm going to use a different user, right? This is for testing purposes. And you might, in your environment, you might need to like go to a website, use your phone or something, right? For demo purposes, we have prepared a command called get MFA token. That's just an alias I have on my system. Get MFA token, and what that's going to do is just give me that 8 to 10 digit number, which I can use as my password. Again, this is all based on your API mediation layer configuration, because, for example, it could have been the password concatenated with the token that we just saw here, right? It has an expiration time, but it doesn't matter if it expires. What happens is that after I authenticated and we saw that nice message saying, hey, you logged in successfully, the API mediation layer returns a token, an API mediation layer token, right? And we're going to continue using that for subsequent requests. And you see the token already expired, but since I already logged in and we are using the token, right? Any operations that I perform after that are leveraging that token. Nope, not that. This is also like a similar file that we saw with the same sort of message, bringing the polling capabilities and all that, right? And again, all that is using the API mediation layer token that we got back from the API mediation layer. Sure, let me do that one. Why not? Hopefully have some jobs running on that system. Not that one. Here, that. Yeah, that works. That's that for the API mediation layer multi-factor authentication. Next up, some setting standardization, right? And how we migrated from V1 to V2. I can probably just, it will be better. I mean, of course, you can sort of see partially the settings here, and we're going to be talking about login later on. But for setting purposes, you probably noticed that in V1, we had all the settings kind of in a different format compared to what other extensions, other VS Code standards are, right? Now with V2, we have moved on to a more streamlined way of storing settings for you in VS Code. that is like a dot notation, and you don't have to worry about losing your history, losing your settings from before from V1. We definitely made sure that those settings are migrated automatically. In terms of logging, I can do a quick search. So we say logger. It is right now set to debug, right? But if we go to the output channel in VS Code, we search for a Zowe Explorer channel, we see that all this debug messages printing up, right? But let's say that I do not want to get that level of detail, that level of information. Our default, it is info, but say that I just want to see any errors that happen on VS Code. Of course, it had to do a quick refresh. But for the purpose of this example, right? Remember the first thing that we did with the CSMF profile? We just search for some data sets, right? What I'm going to do, that sort of proves that I can connect to that system. I'm going to purposely move this to a different port. Going to save that. You're going to see this sort of change a little bit. And we got this error, connection refused. If we go back to the Zowe Explorer output channel, this is the exact same information without you having to like run around looking for your logs, right? You can sort of see that error detail, the error information right within VS Code. You have to go outside, right? So definitely super convenient and customizable, right? You can set it to where you want. Again, default is info. Quick refresh, same error, right? If I do the same operation, of course, I have to switch back to the Zowe Explorer channel. We will get that error information, any info, right? Because I just set it back to the default. Yeah, that's it for that one. And last but not least, my favorite, user experience. When it comes to making your life easier, right? V2 has just a complete advantage over V1 for Zowe Explorer. That being because of multi-selection, the reduced number of pop-ups. You probably didn't notice, but let me fix this before we do anything else so that we don't get those messages. Going back to 3, yep, save, clean up a little bit. And yeah, just show me all the errors. There we go. Another quick refresh. But now, again, I should be able to do any searches. Oops. Now that we're here, we just want to make sure that any multi-selection, as we're talking about, say that you can delete this data set, you can show attributes, you can migrate it. The same operation, not all of them, of course, but multiple different operations can be performed. Say you want to migrate them, so you can now multi-select data sets. Same goes for USS files. You can select multiple directories, perform certain operations, right? There's another item that I wanted to sort of showcase. Didn't notice it as much, but all those notifications that we were getting before, right? In V1, those don't happen anymore. Any other operation that I perform here, you will see something pop up down here, down to the bottom. If I open a data set, if I upload, if I delete something, right? Let's say if I submit this job again, right? We will get the notification for the job because we want to have this convenient link, right? But as I'm opening the spool content, if I do polling, right, even though this job is not going to be changing as much, we see the little polling here. Yeah, that's the reduced pop-ups. I also wanted to briefly talk about filtering and attribute inspection, and my favorite, definitely, the modifying USS attributes graphically. For resource filtering, let's say that we're looking at, say, sys1.parmlib, right? You know that may have a lot of members and whatnot. Say we want to focus on solely the things that start with ADY, right? So I'm going to do another search, and I can tailor that down to the member name, right? which I believe this was not available in V2. And of course, it would do it for any data sets that match and with that member included, right? So we don't see any of the like nodes, any of the other members within those data sets, right? In terms of attribute inspection, we did have attribute inspection before in V1, but it wasn't definitely as clean and thorough, right, as this one, right? Definitely you can see more information at a glance. You don't have to go back to the green screen for this kind of details. And again, as promised, right, I want to go back to, was it? Yeah, API mediation layer. Oops. Nope. There we go. Should still be authenticated, yes. And I'm wanna do users, right? So this file right here, if I edit attributes, this web view, as Timothy mentioned before, shows up. Just to prove, right, I'm gonna SSH into that environment, into that system. And CD, let me make sure, CD into that directory. Oops, it doesn't accept that. That's all right. ls-l. The permissions actually match what we're seeing here on the right. It is owned by Shady0. User has 7, right? The group only has execute, and all has read and execute. I'm just going to make it 777 for the purpose of the demo, right? And I'm going to switch it to another user. Say that this user now owns the directory. You may see here, this web view now says last refresh. You can continue clicking the refresh button in case something happened behind the scenes on the mainframe, right? You get updated attributes. But if I do the same command again, we see 777, 7 for the group, or 7 for the owner, 7 for the group, and 7 for all. No user is user JD1. Just gonna switch it back for just to keep things kind of consistent, right? For the next demo, if there's any demo on this, and LSAL, yep, 755 Shady0, right? Really cool feature and definitely my favorite of all. A lot more coming to this, but now I think I'm good to turn it back to you, Timothy. Thank you for the opportunity to fix my environment.
No problem. Thanks, Fernando. I did want to give an opportunity if you wanted to answer. There was one question so far that was in our Q&A about whether there's any documentation describing the parms in Zowe config JSON. And I did attempt to answer that. I'm not sure if there was anything that you would like to add. So far, I mentioned that there is a Zowe schema, a JSON file that is located like alongside the configuration file. It's in the same directory. And for editors that support it, like VS Code, that will provide some IntelliSense, meaning that when you're editing a team configuration, if you are like trying to edit profile properties and you're like not sure what all properties would be supported, then there is that IntelliSense there is going to activate, is going to show you like a drop-down list of all of the parameters that are supported and like what each one means. I could also like show that like in my VS Code. And then another thing I mentioned is if you do have a Zowe CLI installed, you could append the help option to any command, and that will show you like what all options are available and the documentation for each one. And you should be able then to really like define any of those same options within the team configuration file. I'm not sure if there was anything that you wanted to add to that, Fernando.
No, you summarized it pretty well. Thank you.
Okay. So I will go ahead and share my screen again. So just to recap, all these samples that I showed earlier, these are using a functionality of the Zowe Explorer API. And a second topic I wanted to discuss is, I don't know why this is being slow here, is the fact that we support other environments, not just VS Code, to run Zowe Explorer. And so I just wanted to talk briefly about cloud IDEs. It seems that cloud-hosted environments are kind of an emerging trend. And so if you're not familiar with them, I just wanted to provide a bit of context, since any extensions that you create for Zowe Explorer, maybe you're creating them primarily with the intent of them being used in VS Code, but they can likely be used in these other environments too. So a few advantages of having a cloud environment. One is it has a centralized setup. So system admins, they can install a package of tools for everyone to use, and it's distributed in that way. It can offer improved security, since you don't have developers running all of their tools on their local machines, which would kind of be like more attack vectors. Instead, you can have everything running on a cloud server that has tighter security restrictions in place. And there can be access from anywhere. So you can travel around the world. You don't need to bring your work laptop with you. You can still log in and connect to this cloud-hosted environment. But there are downsides as well. So with the centralized setup, there comes less individual control. And many developers like being able to install like their own customized tools. There's also a greater risk for system-wide downtime. This can be guarded against by having redundancy, where if one server fails, then you can fall back to a second one. But still, just because of the fact that everyone is logged in to the same machine, there is greater risk that if something's down for everyone, that if something is down for one person, it's down then as well for everyone. And you also need to have a strong network to be able to run this, because you need like enough bandwidth for all of the traffic, for all of the people connected to the server, and it needs to be fast as well, so there's not a lot of latency. If someone runs a command on their local machine, it has to travel up to the server and then have the response come back that needs to happen quickly. So I just wanted to mention some examples of two cloud IDEs. There are many out there, but if you're not very knowledgeable about them, and this is your first time being exposed to them, these are some that you may be interested in just checking out and learning a bit more about. One is Theia. It's a web IDE framework. It is very modular and extensible, so it's especially useful for developers to kind of use it kind of as like building blocks to create your own like cloud IDE framework. And it's very useful for developers to be able to do their own testing as well, because it supports not only cloud but also desktop. So you can kind of emulate what it would be like to run Zowe Explorer or your own extensions in the cloud, but you can do that just by running it like locally on your desktop and still within a web browser. Now, if you want a full cloud environment, an example that I will mention for that, that would be a GitHub Codespaces. It's a full a cloud workspace that is hosted like on GitHub servers. It's basically offered by them as software as a service, so you can pay for it to be able to use other servers, or there is also a limited free tier if you just want to test it out. And so both Theia and GitHub Codespaces, they either contain VS Code itself to run in your to run inside of a web browser, or they contain something that is intended to be highly compatible with VS Code. And so you'd likely be able to run not just Zowe Explorer, but also many other VS Code extensions there as well. So just something to think about. And I want then to also end my part just with providing us some useful links if you are interested in extending Zowe Explorer. I will be dropping a link to these slides in the Zoom chat, and I believe that it will also be sent out after this meeting, like in the email that contains the video recording. And so that way, then you can check out any of these links that I have here. So first, for getting started, I've included a link to a good Microsoft tutorial for getting started with your first VS Code extension. They have a tool here that you can run this command, a yo code, and it's going to kind of like walk you through the steps of getting started with a template project that will just get you off the ground running, being able to then start developing a new VS Code extension. And then the other links that I have here are links to extension samples of VS Code themselves, like Microsoft, who is behind VS Code. They have a repository that contains dozens of different samples that are similar to the ones that I showed, just not specific to Zowe. The second link here is for the samples that I have showed today. So if you're interested in seeing those Zowe Explorer specific samples. And then the final links are just to the documentation, both for VS Code's and Zowe Explorer's extender APIs. So if you're interested in seeing like what methods are available and that kind of stuff, the more technical documentation, I've included links to those as well. And that is all for me. I will turn it back to Fernando to wrap up with talking about Zowe v3, I believe.
Yeah, thank you, Timothy. And before we turn it over back to Rose, right? We just wanted to sort of share some details. The V3 pre-release is available on GitHub. It is also available on the OpenVSX registry. If you're getting it from VS Codium, you can just install it from there. Some of the upcoming features that we have planned for V3 are some interactive operations, whether that is interactive TSO prompts, interactive terminals for Unix or SSH commands, right? TSO commands and MBS commands. We have planned a design for a graphical user interface for editing team profiles. And for those more in tune with the VS Code extensions and development of those, VS Code, we want to make sure that we leverage as much as possible the VS Code authentication providers, VS Code file system providers. And if you want to see the complete list of issues for V3, there's a link as well. And back to you, Rose.
Hey, thanks, guys. Let me go back to my screen share real quick, because I think I have a slide that you may not have. Okay, hopefully you're seeing that.
Yes.
Okay, so if for those of you on the call, if you have any questions at all for Timothy or Fernando, please continue to type them in the Q&A. They are managing that as we go. Just a couple more items I wanted to share with all of you. We do this at the end of all of our quarterly webinars. We call it the new to you segment. Just as a reminder, we are continually trying to make Zowe.org as informative and as educational, if you will, as possible. Some of the more recent updates include the ability to have you join our mailing list from the announcements dropdown over in the overview tab. If you just toggle on this little icon, this little hat, if you will, besides announcements, it will expand the announcements menu. This is an old announcement for Zowe 2.9, but nevertheless, we still have a link to joining our user mailing list. Please go ahead and do that. This is our means to reach out to all of you to keep you informed on items such as upcoming webinars. We have our upcoming office hours for V3 that we're going to be talking about in a second, and any other pertinent information. We leverage that mailing list to do so. Additionally, you now have access to the quarterly roadmap. We update the Zowe roadmap when we complete our quarterly planning, and the latest and greatest roadmap can be found right off the homepage at zowe.org, right beside the next release here where it says View Roadmap. You can go ahead and click on that and download that PDF. And then finally, as a means to obtain feedback on a regular basis, we run a question of the month. And this month for September, I believe we ran the same question in August. We are curious about where you stand with respect to your V1 profiles. As Fernando mentioned, we are in the process of introducing technical previews for V3, which means we are planning to introduce V3 soon. I think the current plan is sometime in the first quarter of calendar year 24. And that means the Zowe V1 profiles will be eliminated. So please go ahead and check out the question of the month for September. If you log into zowe.org, you will see that pop up, and let us know what your plans are for dealing with V1 profiles. Okay, moving on to some upcoming events. We have a GSE UK coming up at the end of October, October 30th through November 2nd. There will be some Zowe community members represented in that GuideShare conference. Please do check out the agenda and attend if you are able to do so. There's an open source in finance conference coming up on the 1st of November. It's a single day event. And I want to bring this to your attention because the Open Mainframe Summit will be happening at the same time. So in addition to the finance-centric technology sessions, there will also be intertwined sessions about various Open Mainframe project-sponsored projects, not to sound redundant. So there will be Zowe sessions at this conference. It will be happening in New York on November 1st. There was a similar conference back in September in combination with the IBM Tech Exchange. Open Mainframe Summit had a few sessions on the opening day, September 11th. At that time as well. So do check out the Open Source in Finance conference coming up in New York on November 1st. And then finally, we are in planning for the upcoming Share conference in the US, which will be happening on March 3rd through 7th, 2024. So it is a ways out, but we are in the planning for that conference. And the goal is to have another 4 sessions worth of an entire day of Zowe. We called it Zowe Day at Share New Orleans. As always, we continue to blog and we post our blogs out on medium.com. If you check out medium.com/Zowe, some of the latest blogs include a great read from Billie Jean Simmons, one of the co-leads for the Zowe Explorer for VS Code Squad, where he articulates some of the changes coming with Zowe Explorer v3, similar to what Fernando just reviewed, but this is now in a format that you can print and keep for yourself. If you're interested in the history of Zowe, how each of the Zowe components originally started and who essentially is responsible for developing them, check out Zowe's 5-year journey from concept to key modernization enabler for mainframe. The Zowe ZAC Advisory Council interviewed several members from the original project to give you a fun history on how Zowe was actually formed. And then, of course, we have the usual technical deep dives related to all things Zowe, one of which focuses in on generating and configuring the Zowe API mediation layer for certificates. So please go ahead and check those out. I mentioned this earlier. I want to remind everybody again that because we are planning to introduce Zowe v3, that means we'd like to make sure that all of you are well prepared for Zowe v3. And the way that we approached this with Zowe v2 was that we had the onboarding squad host a number of, or a series of events that we call office hours, and we're going to be starting them up again. They will begin on Friday, October 6th, and they will run through November. We will start with a focus on all of the Zowe extenders, and each of the squads will be presenting some of the upcoming changes that will possibly impact any of the extensions, any of the conformance criteria, etc. And then we'll follow up that series of office hours with a new series of office hours that are focused on Zowe consumers. So anyone who has installed Zowe and is using Zowe, who may be impacted by Zowe v3, please plan on attending. First of all, be on the lookout for the Zowe v3 office hours for consumers, probably be starting up that series in November at some point. And again, the way that we make you all aware of this is we post the information on zowe.org, and we will send email reminders out through that Zowe user mailing list that you can join through zowe.org. And Jen, just another reminder that the V1, Zowe V1 release, it has been in maintenance since we introduced Zowe V2. It will be terminating maintenance next year at this time. So end of September 2024, Zowe V1 will be ending maintenance in the community. So we do want to encourage all of you to upgrade to V2 and ultimately V3 when we release that early next year. And then finally, we have continued to present quarterly updates every quarter since October of 2020. Our next quarterly update is tentatively planned for December 20th. It is the holiday season. Hopefully you'll be around and you'll want to take a break and learn about what we have tentatively planned here called Zowe Event Management. We'll give you an overview of what we're talking about there, what we mean by event management, and with a demonstration of what that might look like for all of you. So please join our mailing list. We'll keep you informed on that next planned quarterly update. And in the event you're not able to join that, or you'd like to watch any of the prior quarterly updates, please be sure to check out our OMP YouTube playlist. The link is included here. And I think that wraps us up for another quarter. Thank you all so much for joining. We hope you found it informative. Please feel free to reach out to any of us. We all hang out at the OMP Zowe Slack channels. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.